Welcome back, everyone, to the Moto HQ podcast. Today, we're diving into some really interesting stuff from Renault, specifically around their new safety tech and initiatives.
Yeah, some pretty forward-thinking stuff.
Yeah, we've been looking at these articles you sent over.
Right.
It seems like they're really trying to change the game when it comes to road safety,
Absolutely.
really taking a proactive approach. And, our mission today is to kind of unpack that,
Yeah.
understand what they're doing and what it could mean for drivers like you listening.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting that we're seeing them coming at this from kind of two different angles.
Yeah.
We've got the personalized feedback stuff like with the safety score,
Mm-hmm.
but then we're also seeing them actually, having a more direct influence on the vehicles themselves.
Right.
Things like the speed limiter. So it's a pretty comprehensive approach.
Right. So let's jump right in with the safety score thing.
Okay.
I mean, it's in the newer models now.
Yep.
Came to the UK this past summer 2024. I mean, this has been, it's been out in other places for a little while now, but
Right.
basically the car gives you a score after every drive.
Yep. Out of 100.
Out of 100. Yeah. And what I find really interesting is that your score can go down
Oh, yeah.
if the car's ADAS systems have to kick in.
It's like you're being graded on how smoothly you drive.
Right, like how much you need the car to step in and be like, whoa there, buddy.
Exactly. So, if you're drifting out of your lane and the lane assist has to nudge you back,
Yeah.
that's a ding on your score.
Damn.
Same with the AEB, the automated emergency braking has to slam on the brakes because you're about to rear end somebody.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's definitely a ding right there.
Yeah, and even things like if you're getting drowsy and the driver drowsiness warning pops up,
Yeah.
that can affect your score.
Wow. So even just like, being tired could hurt your score.
And even the ISA, the intelligent speed assistance, if you're going a little bit too fast. Over the speed limit, and it gives you an alert, that can affect your score.
Oh, wow.
Adaptive cruise control, too. If
Yeah.
you're tailgating the car in front of you,
Uh-huh.
that can also knock you down a few points.
But it's really making you aware of all those little things that you might not even realize you're doing.
Exactly.
It's like having a driving instructor in the passenger seat, but without the judgment.
Yeah, exactly. And Renault, their whole thing is that it's about promoting a positive attitude
Right.
and not pointing fingers of blame.
Yeah.
So it's not about shaming you for, not being a perfect driver.
Right.
It's about giving you that feedback so that you can improve.
Yeah. And I think that's really cool because, it's not just about having all these safety features,
Right.
but it's about being aware of how you're driving and how you're interacting with them.
Exactly.
We have.
And I think this is really part of a bigger trend that we're seeing in the automotive industry, where it's moving beyond just, reacting to accidents.
Yeah.
It's about proactively trying to guide drivers towards safer habits.
Yeah, like preventing accidents before they even have a chance to happen.
Exactly.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And the thought is that if drivers are more aware of how their driving is triggering these systems,
Right.
they might naturally start adjusting their behavior.
Yeah. Start driving a little bit more smoothly and a little bit more safely.
Exactly.
Now, of course, the big question that everyone's thinking about is, the safety score data.
Yeah.
It can be stored, and there's been talk about potentially sharing it with insurance companies.
Right.
Which, could lead to lower premiums for drivers who are getting good scores.
Right, which is very similar to those telematics policies or the black box policies
Yeah.
that we've seen becoming more popular.
Especially with younger drivers.
Yeah, where they basically track your driving.
Right.
And your insurance is based on how well you drive.
So it's like you're being rewarded for being a safe driver,
Exactly.
which I think is a really cool concept.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because Renault hasn't actually confirmed yet
Right.
whether they're going to be sharing this data with insurers.
Yeah.
But the fact that they're even talking about it
Right.
and the fact that these black box systems are already out there,
Huh?
I think it's a pretty clear indication of where things might be heading.
Yeah, it seems like the technology is there
Mm-hmm.
and the potential benefits are there. So
Absolutely.
it'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see how that unfolds.
Yeah.
So that's the safety score, which is all about feedback and awareness.
Right.
But Renault's also taking a much more direct approach.
Yeah.
With the Clio model specifically, as part of their Human First Safety initiative,
Right.
they're actually introducing speed limiters.
Yep.
So this is really about kind of putting a technological cap on how fast the car can go.
Right. And they're currently rolling this out in France.
Uh-huh.
And it's called the safety car package.
Okay.
And it basically limits the top speed of the Clio
Okay.
to 68 miles per hour.
68 miles per hour, which I think is interesting because,
It's just under the motorway speed limit here in the UK.
yeah, so it's not like they're making it so you can't drive on the motorway,
Right.
but they are putting a pretty significant limit on how fast you can go.
Exactly. And I think the reason behind this is really interesting.
Yeah.
They've pointed out that progress in reducing road fatalities has actually slowed down since 2010,
Really?
and that over half of speed-related deaths involve drivers under 35.
Wow.
And the Clio, of course, is a very popular car with new and younger drivers.
Right. Very common first car.
So this seems like a very deliberate attempt
Yeah.
to address that statistic.
So they're really targeting that demographic
Absolutely.
to try to reduce those tragic accidents.
Yep.
And this isn't just, a suggestion. This is a hard limit.
Right. It's not just an advisory.
Yeah.
It actually affects all the speed-related functions in the car.
So even if you try to set the cruise control
Yep.
or use the regular speed limiter,
Mm-hmm.
it won't go above 68 miles per hour.
Well,
it's
yeah.
like they've put a governor on the engine.
Exactly.
Now, one thing that's interesting is that this isn't actually installed during manufacturing.
Right.
It's added after purchase.
It's a configuration of the engine control unit.
Okay.
So you can actually get it reversed if you want.
Oh, so it's not a permanent thing.
No.
Okay.
But you have to go back to the dealership,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a charge for it.
Okay, so it's like 59 euros, which is just over 50 pounds.
Yeah.
So it's not free to reverse it,
No.
which I think is interesting because it kind of suggests that they want people to really think about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not something you're just going to, switch on and off on a whim.
Right.
It's a considered decision.
Yeah, and they're hoping that, the potential benefits,
Mm.
like, the peace of mind for parents. Right. The possibility of lower insurance premium,
Absolutely.
that those will outweigh, the hassle of having to go back to the dealership and pay to have it removed.
Right.
And it is worth pointing out that all Renaults sold since 2022,
Mm-hmm.
they already have a speed limiter
Yep.
set at 112 miles per hour.
So this is much more restrictive.
Yeah, this is like really targeting a specific type of driver.
And a specific model.
And a specific model.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting, I think, that they've got Pierre Gasly,
Oh, yeah.
the Alpine F1 driver, as the face of their safety campaign.
Yeah, it's kind of a cool juxtaposition, isn't it?
Yeah, because you've got this guy who's, all about speed and performance,
Right.
but he's also advocating for safety.
Exactly.
And I think that sends a really powerful message.
Yeah, it's about responsible driving no matter what kind of car you're driving.
Absolutely.
Whether you were on the track or on the road.
So bringing all this back to you as the listener,
Yeah.
what does this all mean for you?
Right.
Well, these initiatives from Renault really signal a pretty big shift
Uh-huh.
towards using technology to actively promote safer driving
Mm-hmm.
and potentially even influence how much you pay for your car insurance.
Absolutely.
So on one hand, you've got the safety score,
Right.
which is all about giving you that personalized feedback on your driving habits
Yep.
after every trip.
Uh-huh.
And then on the other hand, you've got the speed limiter on the Clio,
Right.
which is a much more direct intervention.
Yeah, it's actually limiting the car's capabilities,
Right.
which is a pretty big step.
It's a pretty big step.
Yeah.
And it kind of raises the question of,
Mm.
how comfortable are you with having this kind of monitoring and control in your vehicle?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because, on one hand, you've got the potential benefits
Right.
of, increased safety, potentially lower insurance costs.
Right.
But on the other hand, you've got this question of personal freedom.
Yeah, like where do you draw the line
Exactly.
between, being given information and being told what to do?
Right. And I think it's a conversation that we're going to be having more and more.
Yeah, as these technologies become more common.
Absolutely.
So we really encourage you to think about these implications.
Yeah.
Knowing that you're getting a driving score,
Mm-hmm.
actually change your driving habits.
Yeah.
Would you be more mindful of, staying in your lane,
Uh-huh.
not tailgating,
Right.
not speeding?
Yeah.
What about the speed limiter?
Mm-hmm.
Would you consider that for yourself or for a young driver in your family?
It's a tough question.
It's a tough question, yeah. But it's one that's worth thinking about.
Absolutely.
Now, if you're finding this deep dive interesting,
Yeah.
and you want to hear more discussions like this,
Mm.
please take a moment to subscribe to the Moto HQ podcast
Yeah.
and leave us a review.
We really appreciate your support.
It really helps us out.
Absolutely.
So Getting back to Renault and their initiatives, I think what really stands out to me is that they're really being proactive here.
Yeah, they're not just waiting for accidents to happen.
Right.
They're actively trying to shape driver behavior
Yeah.
and the capabilities of their vehicles.
Right. And to me, that seems like a really positive step.
Absolutely.
It's about trying to make the roads safer for everyone.
And I think this could be a sign of things to come for the whole automotive industry.
Yeah, I think other manufacturers are going to be watching very closely to see how these initiatives play out.
Yeah,
And I wouldn't be surprised if we see more and more of this kind of technology
absolutely.
in the future.
It's a really interesting time for car safety.
Yeah, it is.
We've got this combination of feedback systems like the safety score
Uh-huh.
and more direct interventions like the speed limiter.
Right.
It's a multifaceted approach.
Mm-hmm.
It is. And it's going to be fascinating to see how it all plays out.
Well, thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into Renault's safety initiatives here on the Moto HQ podcast.
Thanks for listening.
We hope you found it informative and thought-provoking.
Mm-hmm.
And if you did, please don't forget to subscribe and leave a review.
Absolutely.
And as always, thanks for listening to the Moto HQ podcast.
Thank you.